Pseudocode. What is it? Pseudocode is exactly what its name suggests. It's pseudo, meaning not genuine, code. So you might ask yourself, if it's not real code, then what is its purpose? Well, pseudocode can serve a few purposes. Firstly, it can be a way to outline and create a blueprint for your final code, helping to plan out the general structure of your code before fully implementing it. Secondly, it can be useful as a way to demonstrate what computer code is doing by putting it into more easily understood language. Lastly, creating pseudocode can be used as a tool for a new programmer to start understanding the previous 2 points, helping them to learn better code planning using object-oriented principles, for example, or helping to break down computer code into terms someone with no programming knowledge can understand. Now that you know some of its uses though, you probably want to know what it looks like. Well, that is part of the beauty of pseudocode. There is no one exact way to write pseudocode. For instance, let's look at 2 examples of pseudocode, using the tried and true program example of Hello World. This example is in C#, but by using pseudocode we could represent it as either one of these, or even more. Now, as great as Hello World is, it's not the best example for this. So instead, let's look at some slightly more complex C++ code. If you're new to programming or unfamiliar with C++, it might take you a minute to understand what this code is doing. But let's change it to a couple of examples of pseudocode. More than likely, it's a lot easier for you to understand what the code is now doing because we stopped using computer terms and used more recognizable language. In fact, with pseudocode, it's a lot easier to take it and turn it into a plain text paragraph that explains exactly what your code is doing. You might be wondering now though, if there is no one way to create pseudocode, then can anything be pseudocode? The answer to that is, of course, no. While there are no set guidelines for phrasing and words, you still have to make sure you're using terms and formatting that keeps your pseudocode readable. In the previous examples, I used indentations to help keep blocks of code together. That is one way to keep things readable and helps when you actually turn your pseudocode into real code. Another thing to keep in mind is to not change common terminology. For instance, don't change the words for classes or functions. If instead of calling it class you called it entity, it suddenly makes your pseudocode confusing if not unreadable for anyone but yourself. The same goes for loops like for loops or while loops, as well as if and else if statements. One last thing to keep in mind is that with pseudocode, you might not have a one-to-one translation to your lines of code. For example, you may not break down every line of this function, but instead provide a line of pseudocode describing what the function does. As long as it clearly describes the functionality, this is typically fine. Of course, you can write out every line as well. Hopefully now you have a better understanding of pseudocode and its uses. Stay tuned for more.